F represents days until onset of symptoms. G represents symptom severity. H represents duration of symptoms. I represents risk of complications. I put the word all in parentheses because this represents the risk of all complications. You could divide I into a group of a bunch of other factors representing the risk of certain complications, like the risk of having a heart attack, or the risk of having a blood clot, or the risk of having kidney or liver failure or brain damage, or any other of the many complications that people have had due to coronavirus. J represents the risk of being put on a ventilator, which technically is a complication, but because it is like one of people's main concerns, I decided to put it in its own separate factor. K is unfortunately the risk of death. Now, if you know A, B, C, D, and E, and Z, you should be able to, if you are a mathematician or scientist of some kind, to be able to create an equation that would determine F, G, H, I, J, and K. I would like somebody else who is more educated than me to do this for me. A few months ago, I had to go to the hospital, and while I was in the waiting room, I noticed a lady who looked incredibly similar to my mother. She looked like my mother when my mother was in her 50s. The lady was in her 50s, looked incredibly like my mother, and one of the things that made her look similar is she had veins like mine that really bulged out of her wrists and her arms and her legs. She was wearing sandals, so I could see her ankles, and I could see that her ankles looked just like mine. And by just like mine, I mean full of bulging veins with lots of varicose veins. I tried to strike up a conversation with this lady, and I said something that I probably shouldn't have said. I said, "Your veins look just like mine, and you've got varicose veins too. Isn't that cool? Are you also part Italian, like I am?" The lady gave me a dirty look, told me she was part Italian, but was obviously dismayed that I had noticed something that she thought was a flaw with her body. I had noticed her bulging veins and varicose veins. So I inherited these bulging veins and the affinity to develop varicose veins from my mother, who is half Italian, who inherited them from her father, my grandfather, who was full-blooded Italian. He actually moved to America from Italy when he was a very young child. I think he was 3 years old or so when he moved to America. I'm not sure. I could ask my mother to find out. And by the way, sorry about the rooster. Our friends gave us the rooster so we could eat it for dinner. And then it escaped from my property, and it took us days to catch it. So we have not eaten it for dinner yet. It will be gone very soon. I promise. Recently, a friend of a friend ended up staying at my house for a few days because all of the campgrounds in Humboldt County, California are closed, and the hotels will not rent to anyone from out of the area. I would like to thank my friend for bringing this person over to my house, because this person had the exact same veins as I do and is also Italian. Check out the video clip of our arms together. We both have the same veins. I am 1/4 Italian, and she is full-blooded Italian. See that? We both have the same unique veins that bulge out a little bit. Put your hand up a little more so I can show they're in the exact same pattern too. Isn't that weird and cool? Yeah, and mine do the same thing, just a little lower in my hand, yeah. When I saw how my newfound friend's veins were similar to mine and found out that we were of similar heritage, I started thinking about how some countries have been more affected by coronavirus than others, and how scientists are saying that could be because certain people are genetically more susceptible to getting sick or dying of coronavirus. Some races of people share specific genetic traits that could make them more susceptible to coronavirus. There are also many strains of coronavirus because it has apparently mutated into many strains. I have developed a rudimentary equation, and it's a rudimentary equation because I am not a mathematician or a scientist, but I have developed a rudimentary equation, and I hope that somebody watching this video who is a mathematician or a scientist can develop this into an actual functioning equation to determine how sick somebody will get from coronavirus. This is my equation right here. I'm going to show it to you, and then I am going to explain it to you. If you put in factors A, B, C, and D, which matter less, and Z is constant, you will get X, which is not actually one number, but a set. X will determine F, G, H, I, J, and K. Now this equation assumes that Z is a constant. That is why it says solve for all variables assuming Z is a constant. If Z changes, F, G, H, I, J, and K might change. But for every possible Z, you should be able to determine an F, G, H, I, J, and K. A is the strain of coronavirus that the person was exposed to. Certain strains are way more dangerous than other strains, especially to people with certain genetics. Now, obviously, you may not know what strain of coronavirus somebody was exposed to, but that can be determined with some kind of test. So some of these variables might not be known, but assuming that you know all of these variables, you should be able to determine all of these variables. If you don't know all of these variables, you might get an approximation of these variables, but you will still get some determination of how sick somebody will get from coronavirus, even if you don't know all of these variables. So A is the strain they're exposed to, B is the person's DNA, which yet again you may not know, but could be determined through some kind of test. C is their exposure level, which yet again you may not know, but could be determined approximately. In parentheses are D and E. D is their age, E is their health conditions, meaning underlying health conditions that could make them more susceptible to coronavirus. The reason that D and E are in parentheses is that D and E actually matter less than A, B, and C. Z means medical care available, because the level of medical care that could make somebody able to survive coronavirus is a variable that is different not only in every country, but in different areas of a given country. So for every possible Z, the product of A, B, C, and D and E, meaning these, will be different. So what do these represent? F represents days until onset of symptoms. G represents symptom severity. H represents duration of symptoms. I represents risk of complications. I put the word all in parentheses because this represents the risk of all complications. You could divide I into a group of a bunch of other factors representing the risk of certain complications, like the risk of having a heart attack or the risk of having a blood clot, or the risk of having kidney or liver failure or brain damage, or any other of the many complications that people have had due to coronavirus. J represents the risk of being put on a ventilator, which technically is a complication, but because it is like one of people's main concerns, I decided to put it in its own separate factor. K is unfortunately the risk of death. Now, if you know A, B, C, D, and E, and Z, you should be able to, if you are a mathematician or scientist of some kind, to be able to create an equation that would determine F, G, H, I, J, and K. I would like somebody else who is more educated than me to do this for me. Please and thank you. Here it is. There it was. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please like this video, share this video, watch my other videos, and subscribe to my channel. And by the way, I will be talking about a few of these things very, very soon in my next video. And if you liked this video and you would like to help me to make my next video or more videos in the future, you can. You can help me out by donating money to me on Patreon or other sites, or buying things from me off of Amazon or other sites. Thanks for watching, and bye, people.